Shalom, shalom. It's that time again where in a matter of a couple of hours or so, we're getting ready to welcome the Shabbat. And this is a very special Shabbat. This is Shabbat Tzav. And it is also Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbat. This is the Shabbat before Pesach. The Shabbat directly before Pesach. And so this past week, I uploaded a couple of songs that in the description, I put that they are, will be on the upcoming album, Ruth HaMoaviyah. I'm writing some songs focused on the story of Ruth. And so those songs were, they had to do with that album. And, Max, why am I focusing on Ruth right now? Because Ruth, typically, the story of Ruth, the Megillah of Ruth is read during Shavuot, right? And we know that because it was during that the wheat festival, which is associated with Shavuot, that she went to the threshing floor to meet with Boaz. Now, what is people don't really talk about, or a lot of teachers don't talk about, is that Ruth is also associated with Pesach because it was around that season. It was that same season, the time of the barley harvest, which is Pesach, that Ruth and Naomi entered Eretz Israel. Now, that can be seen as a small exodus. A small exodus that included, just these two individuals. But it was not easy for Naomi to leave Moab to return to Eretz Israel. The story begins with the words, Vayhi b'mei shafot hashoftim, Vayhi Yoav ba'aretz, Vayelech ish מבית לחם יהודה לגור בשדה מואב הוא ואשתו ושני בניו. And what that says that in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and two sons went to reside in the country of Moab. Now, there's so much, there's so many symbolisms in just this one verse. We have the judges were ruling the land at the time, the Shoftim, and the men, and there was a famine. There was a famine. Usually, moving to another place often was made so by a famine. Famine. We can't live here. We can't stay here. We have to go to eat. That's why Abraham went down to Egypt the first time. He went down to Egypt because there was a famine in the land. There was a famine in the land when Yaakov went down to Egypt, right? And now there's a famine in the land, and even though they did not go down to Egypt, this man and his wife and his two sons did not go down to Egypt. They still went to a spiritually low place, and that was like turning their back on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Some say that the Torah tells us he was an Ephrathite, which means that he was very fruitful. He was a very wealthy person. Okay? And what did he do? He took his wealth with him and he went to another country. He didn't stay to help take care of the people, in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem literally means the house of bread. Okay? The house of bread. So there is a famine in the house of bread. And this wealthy man, full of substance, did not want to share his substance with anyone else. And so instead he packed up and he moved to a different land where they began to be assimilated into that culture. And the man died there. He was buried there. His sons married women from that land. The women that they married were not commoners. They were not peasants. Can you imagine that a father, a man who was wealthy, who did not want to share his wealth with the poorer people around him, moving to another land? Can you see him allowing his sons to marry peasant women? No, absolutely not. These women were princesses. They were nobility, and so they too died, leaving their wives without children. I don't know if you can see this, but this tells me that there was a curse in operation in this family. This family had a curse operating on them because they had turned away from Hashem, they had turned away from His Torah, they had turned away from His ways, and they were going and seeking out the ways of the Goyim, and to live like the Goyim, to cohabit with the Goyim, and to be just like them, and to give the wealth that Hashem had given them to the Goyim. And so that's a sad story. Now, there are three things that I want to say, because I want to do more teaching on this whole, all the characters in this story. And Elimelech, his name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi, and his two sons, Machlon and Chilion. And the names that don't have very good meaning, the names of the children, you have to wonder why they gave such names to their children. We'll talk about that at another time. But there are three things that I really want to bring out about the story about Naomi. That after her sons, her husband and her sons died, she decided to return to Eretz Israel. And the thing about that was that that was not easy. That was not an easy thing for her to do. So there are three things that I want to bring out about her. And number one, she went along with her husband. She didn't try to change his mind. She didn't try to persuade him in staying in Bethlehem and not going to a pagan land where they would come under the authority of the pagan deities that these people worship, and be affected and infected by the culture of that place, enough so as to intermarry into that in that system. She went along with it. And what was the consequence of her going along with it? It destroyed her house. It destroyed her family. Okay? We are told in Proverbs that a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. And unfortunately, in this case, it seems that Naomi was a foolish woman. Perhaps she just wanted to keep the peace. We do that. Wives do that. We compromise in order to keep the peace in the household. But Shalom Bayit, at such a cost, it doesn't work. That's not true Shalom Bayit. And so she went along with it and ended up losing her husband, her sons. And in the end, when she returned, she was blaming God for all the problems. I went out full, I came back empty. God abandoned me. He took away everything from me. Aren't we like that? Aren't we like that? Instead of saying, I did wrong, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I did not live out my purpose as the helpmeet of my husband. Because what is the helpmeet? Someone who stands opposite him. Okay? And that meant that if he's not going right, if he's not doing right, she can't just sit by and be silent and go along with it. You can't be a doormat when your husband, your spouse, your mate is doing wrong. is breaking the commandments of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't just go along with it. You can't just fold your hands and let the chips fall where they may, or wish for the best or hope for the best. No, so she didn't do that. She did not live up to her part of being a Hebrew woman in that instance. Okay. Now, the second thing that I would like to bring out is that she probably had survivor's guilt. Now, it says that she learned that the famine had, was no longer. She heard that there was no more famine. The land was prospering. Now, they spent at least 10 years in the land of Moab. It took 10 years for her to find out that there was no longer a famine in her hometown. No. But like I said, going back was not an easy thing. Facing the people that you left behind, that you could have helped, having to live among them, to look them in the eye, would not have been an easy thing. So psychologically, from that standpoint, it would have been a very difficult thing for her to do. And then the fact that they were now under some kind of the influence of that land and that culture made it even more difficult for her to go. So no, I don't think it took 10 years for her to find out that there was no longer a famine in her hometown. The longest famine that we really saw in the scriptures was 7 years. That's typically a 7 years famine. And when you have a famine that lasts for 7 years, it's usually a sign of judgment. A sign of judgment. So, we can see the situation of kind of guess a little bit of the situation that they were in that would foster such selfishness, so that Elimelech decided, I'm not sharing. I'm taking everything I have and I'm moving. I'm moving to another place. We have people who, because of, a political leader, says, we're moving. And some of them have actually moved. Some of them have actually left. And I'm going, what's the purpose? What is the purpose of this? You willingly go into exile. You willingly go into exile for no good reason. For no good reason. So the survivor guilt that I'm talking about was that her husband died, her 2 sons died, but she was still alive. In that situation, people would think, why did I survive? Why did I survive? And I'm sure she must have seen her wrong, the wrong that she had done, the thing that she had neglected to do, staring her in the face every day and saying, if only I had stood up and say to my husband, let's not do this. Let's trust in Hashem. Maybe my children and my husband would have still been alive. Now, the third thing that I would like to bring out is that she likely would not have made it back to the land without Ruth, her daughter-in-law. She would not have survived and entered the land. That is my personal thought on the matter. But from the vow that Ruth made and what she took on herself to take care of her mother-in-law, without Ruth, where would Naomi have ended up? So those are 3 things that we will be talking about as we lead up to Pesach. Now, I mentioned that this Shabbat is Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat before Pesach, and it is also Parashat Tzav, the Parashat Shavuot, the Parashat of the week is Tzav, which is to command, give a command. And in our post Shabbat discussion, that with myself and Mike, we will be talking about Tzav, and usually we do it unscripted and, off the cuff. But this time we're going to maybe try to do it half and half. We'll just discuss, personal insights we received throughout the Shabbat. And then I will also present a Dvar Torah, a teaching that I wrote some time ago on the Mokdah, or the Eish Tamid, the perpetual fire that should be on the altar, never going out. And I hope you will be able to join me and and watch that when that comes out, and see the wonderful and manifold wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let me wish you a wonderful, marvelous Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Hagadol, and Chag Pesach Sameach.